I was tagged in this creator's video, and honestly, this video should have way more views. She was dropping the hotness with this. She says, these are the four default modes of males in the patriarchy. And then she starts to talk about projection, repression, avoidance, and violence. Now, if you are on TikTok, I'm not going to post her video. You need to go over there and find her page. Her name is Iman Get a Life. Here is this woman's page. Please go over there and follow her. She dropped the mic with this one. If you are watching me on YouTube, her video will follow this. But what I want you to do is get out a piece of paper right now, and as she is talking about these individual items, projection, repression, and avoidance, I want you to be taking notes and thinking of examples that we have talked about when, we're talking about these story times or these Reddit posts. Think about what an example of projection, repression, and avoidance, because she said all of these in one form or another, or maybe a combination, lead up to violence.
Most dudes have four default modes: projection, repression, avoidance, and violence. And if you as a woman are tired of getting bamboozled by dudes, then you need to keep an ear out and an eye out for these four traits. Let me break them down for you. Projection is probably the easiest one to spot because it's the one that almost all of them do. Everything a dude ever says is a projection of how he feels about himself. If he has low self-worth, he's gonna say a lot of negative things to you. And I don't want you to internalize that, okay? It's not about you, it is projection. When a dude has high self-worth, he uplifts everybody around him. He projects that high self-worth onto everybody around him. Repression has a lot to do with how much a man is pretending. And I find repression particularly dangerous because the more a guy is repressed, the more potential he has to be violent. And repression is essentially him pretending that he doesn't have feelings, him pretending that he doesn't want to do certain things that he does want to do, him pretending that he likes his job when he hates his job, him pretending that something didn't bother him when it did bother him and it happened 14 years ago and it's been bothering him for 14 years. All of these things are repression, and that is a default mode of men under patriarchy because they are told that it makes them weak if they express their emotions, or if they go to therapy, or if they cry, or if they bring up something that's really traumatic that happened to them and they're vulnerable about it, right? So you as a woman should avoid repressed men because they have the potential to get triggered by anything. And then once they're triggered, they can become violent. So unless he's gone to therapy to deal with that, do not engage with men who are in their repression mode. Next is avoidance. And avoidance is different than repression because with repression, you keep it to yourself, but with avoidance, you occupy yourself with something else. A lot of dudes avoid certain things like uncomfortable feelings and whatever by drinking, smoking, doing drugs, playing video games, watching porn. They usually have a vice and they use that vice to avoid very uncomfortable things. A dude who has a lot of things that he's avoiding is not going to be a healthy partner for you because he's going to be occupied in whatever substance or vice he's using to avoid facing himself. When you meet dudes who have vices and rely on them heavily, that is a telltale sign they are avoiding something. And that's why violence is the last one, because they have the three default modes of projection, which means they never take accountability for anything, repression, which means they pretend nothing's bothering them, and avoidance, which means they occupy themselves with something else. And so the only way left for them to express themselves is through violence. That's why violence is their fourth default mode. A lot of girls don't really understand how certain things can be violent even if they're not physical. So emotional abuse is violent. Telling you that he wants you to yourself or threatening to you is violent. So any threats are violent. Any jokes about, unaliving you or getting rid of your body or doing something harmful to you is an indication that he has the potential to be violent. And then, of course, if he exhibits projection, avoidance, and repression, then he has the potential to be violent as well. Majority of dudes will find one or two of those modes to alternate between. A lot of it is projection and avoidance. Sometimes it's repression and projection. Sometimes it's avoidance and violence. Sometimes it's a combination of all four. Hardly any of them realize that there is a fifth mode they can be operating out of called self-awareness. right? Because when you're self aware, you know why you're saying the things you're saying so you don't project. You know why you're feeling the things you're feeling, how to deal with those feelings so you don't repress. And you know that you have substance abuse issues or you're escaping through something else. And so you sit down and you have a talk with yourself and you set yourself some boundaries. When dudes are operating in their self awareness mode, they will not be violent, they will not be avoidant, they will not be repressed, and they will not project anything on. And understand that every single issue that you're dealing with in your relationship stems from one of those 4 default modes. I'm telling you this. If he says something mean to you out of nowhere, it's because he's projecting something that he hasn't dealt with onto you. And if he cancels plans to go, drinking with the boys, it's because he's avoiding something else that's bothering him, that's gnawing at him. All right. And if he says violent things to you or puts his hands on you, it's because he's dealing with a combination of those 3 things. I'm not making excuses for them. I'm really not making any excuses for them. I'm telling you, ladies, so you can make better choices. That's all.
Me, I pulled out a notebook. I literally pulled out a notebook and started writing down some examples. And these are going to be some examples that we have talked about. We've talked about them before. We've heard them before. We know what these things are. So, projection, that was one of the first things she was talking about. Projection is a defense mechanism, right? And it's like literally a projector. They are saying things about their partners or women in general, and they really mean that for themselves. Some examples that I've written down. They accuse their partners of cheating. But they're the ones that are literally cheating. They all of the talk, the cat lady talk, the women are the least married, or the ladies are just dying alone. All of that is projection. They know that they are lonely in them houses by themselves or with their boys. They know that those that they are not really creating real friendship bonds with those other men, and they would rather be with women. They know that they're lonely. That's the reason why they're always talking about women being lonely and talking about some cats. One of those red pill talking points talking about how women are more dishonest, or women lie more, or more women are cheaters. That is literal projection. The gaslighting, making it seem like you're doing something or not doing something, and you know good and well that that's not how it happened. And Darvo. If you guys do not remember, we have talked about Darvo. Darvo is when they've done something and then you call them out on it. They deny it. That's what the D stands for. They attack you. Like, how dare you come at me? How dare you accuse me of being sexist or misogynistic? And then they reverse victim, or they reverse victim and offender, where it's just like, oh my God, you're always blaming me for these things. Every time, we get into it, I'm the bad guy. That's some examples of Darvo. And like I said, I was just kind of taking some notes. This is something that I want to continue the conversation on. So that's projection. Repression. So a man that is repressing who he really wants to be. So, society has painted many of these people into a box. They're supposed to be stoic. They're supposed to be leaders. They're supposed to be confident. They're supposed to never display any emotion outside of anger and passion, maybe something else along those lines. So this is a person, looking at my notes, who might not ask for help, might not show that he's vulnerable in something, might not admit that he doesn't know something, so he won't ask for it. And one that we have seen, they might not date who they are actually attracted to. They might date who is socially acceptable and who their boys might rubber stamp, but they're really into some women that might not be socially acceptable, and so they don't want to bring them around because they know that their boys might clown them or something like that. And avoidance. Avoidance means completely avoiding the situation, not tackling it head on. And so let's say they're having some issues communicating. She has said, look, Derek, I really want to talk to you about such and such when you get home. So he doesn't come home. He avoids her. He instead, stays late for work, or he cheats. That's an avoidance tactic, cheating. Um, doing the drugs, gambling, these golf outings where they disappear all weekend, doing lawn care where they're just avoiding any kind of semblance of family time or something like that. Oh my gosh, we've heard this one, the playing of the video games for way too long. There are so many examples of these three things, and when they are not living how they want to, living authentically, this is where they will or could become angry. And we have talked about the whole failing and flailing, where so many of them are starting to act out. And a lot of the times it's because of one or two or a combination of these things that's going on, and we're starting to see this uptick of family manipulators. Because maybe those people really didn't want to be the traditional providers or something like that. We're starting to see random attacks of women. We're seeing the intimate partner violence. I mean, we've seen that. We saw the uptick of DV during the panini and all of that. So we're seeing these things happen, but take some notes as I'm doing the Reddit posts in the mornings, like I usually do, or the story times. Let's start highlighting these things for red flag's sake. Are we seeing projection? Are we seeing repression? Are we seeing avoidance? Let's start naming it. Let's start naming it so that we can see it in real life. Like I said, this woman, she dropped the mic with this one. And if you're on the TikTok right now, go over there and watch her video and just let her know, support her over there. If you're on my YouTube, let me know what you thought of this. Go ahead. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. And we're going to be bringing up these terms more and more: projection, repression, and avoidance. Make sure to take notes on this. And when you're watching future videos, be like, aha, that's an example of this, this, and that. That's where we are right now. This is an ongoing lesson. This is a role playing lesson that we're going to have right now. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.